This panel is really all about what happens, like, shit happens. it happens, and everyone on this panel has a different perspective of how they experienced that shit. So, first we have Sachin from Cloudflare. Sachin has been breaking things and figuring out what makes them tick for over a decade now. He loves outdoor adventure and once helped debug a production issue for the mountains of Peru in a hut. Jordan. Jordan is an OSS maintainer, not satisfied with merely causing problems for one company. Jordan has been making mistakes in JavaScript itself since 2014 and can take down hundreds of millions of build systems by publishing a single innocuous code change to NPM. We've got Jewel. Jewel has been shitposting and sad tweeting her way to a comfortable tech career over a decade in community consumer product engineering as a software engineer, manager, and all the hats startupper. She hasn't accidentally taken down production in a whole month, mostly thanks to PTO. And then finally, we have Andrew. Andrew has been involved in a large-scale infrastructure for over 20 years. He may or may not have caused sites like AOL, YouTube, and Dropbox outages on sites like AOL, YouTube, and Dropbox. Now he's working on making the cloud a little less shit for all of us. All right, hang on, I just locked my phone, and with this mask, I don't have Face ID for my first question. Truly, this panel was the inception of this whole conference. As I mentioned at the beginning, I really want to talk about how this is hard and shit happens, and I don't want you all to walk away super depressed, but this is that panel that I was very excited to have for this conference. So rather than just like a set of questions, I kind of want to treat this a little bit like a story time and let each of you tell a little bit about a time when you had that oh shit moment. We've all had them, whether it was something as simple as I accidentally just rm-rf an entire folder in school, or I took down AOL, YouTube, and Dropbox. We've all had them. And so I want to ask you all, maybe whoever wants to go first, one of your biggest or just most emotional, I don't know, what do you all want to hear? The biggest, most newsworthy, the one no one heard about, oh shit moment.
I can go first.
Let's do it.
I can talk about, James just talked a lot about Dropbox. I'll go to YouTube. This is probably 2010. I think at that point, YouTube probably had somewhere between 10 and 15 billion views a day, which is like an extremely large number even then. And we were going from Python 2.4 to Python 2.6. This is like that era. I drew the unlucky straw of doing the upgrade on YouTube that night, which is about probably at the time like maybe only 3,000 web servers. And the way this upgrade was going to happen is, who's familiar with NetScalers? Anybody here familiar with NetScalers? I'm guessing the Cloudflare guys are, yes. And so think of them as like ALBs or ELBs, but they're actually hardware devices, and the way they work is you can have a health check that you're checking on your web server to see if it's up. We had a single file on every server that we checked to validate it was up. It was called in.txt. You took it out by moving that file to in-your username.txt, and then you did whatever you're going to do, and then you're going to put the server back in production by moving it back in. So I had a for loop going across every server. No deployment systems, nothing like Kubernetes, nothing like that exists, right? So this is all shell scripts. And so I'm running a for loop that's just like for in servers at YouTube. Do this, move the file, run. Also, no package management back then. This command called ncap, the system called ncap, it's epackage, to install Python, and then restart the web server, and then put the file back. Well, I didn't put the file back correctly because I had a typo in my username for like the move back, and I just like was running this for loop. There's like thousands of these, so I'm just like trying to like keep up with it. And somebody pings me an hour later saying, hey, YouTube is down. I'm like, wait, what the hell is happening here? Like, everything should be going back in. This should be working. And then I realized that, like, well, it's not failing silently. It's just, like, just moving it and failing and just, like, moving on with its life. So I ended up taking down, like, 90% of the capacity. And, like, the last 10% of these, like, 4 little web servers are trying to, like, keep YouTube up. That's probably the last time I directly did something then moved into management at Dropbox because of that probably. So that's kind of my biggest outage I've caused in the last probably decade.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, I'll go next. So Cloudflare was trying to do all of this work to give developers the ability to sort of preview their work and spin up these sandbox environments and things like that. Super awesome technology, all the things that we've been talking about, trying to, ease of releases, ease of testing, deployment. Awesome, great. Well, so there was a developer who was working on some code locally, and this system was designed to run in CI, but it didn't disallow you from running it locally. Now, new technology, you can't really blame a dev for not really knowing how to use it. So this dev sort of spins up their dev thing, and they're like, oh, cool, I can kind of spin up this sandbox environment, and kind of assuming that it's going to run in CI, guess which environment it decided to run when it was in CI? It was production. So suddenly, across Cloudflare, we kind of saw the website having random development code with hello, debug, testing, and things like that. And so we're like, well, what is happening right now? This is really random and weird. And so that's when we figure out, oh no, someone's using this. That's the oh shit moment. Like, oh, we need to find out where this is happening, and then from there, try and fix the thing. And this was probably one of the worst moments of my professional life, is when I had to basically SSH into a production box, read a bunch of minified JavaScript, compare it to this person's source code, try and figure out kind of what changed, and then comment out all of the lines in production to try and figure out how we can bring this back, because redeploying this took a while, and bringing the website back online was sort of the most important thing to do. And we got back online. I didn't further break everything. I felt tremendously horrible after doing that, but everything was okay. My manager took me out for a drink, and we just sat down and had a conversation after that. But that was definitely one of the times where I was like, oh shit, like this is not great. Yeah.
Yeah. Impressive, though, that you went through all that minified JavaScript and found it. Jordan or Joel?
Yeah, so I've been working in consumer product engineering for years, but ads engineering I kind of stumbled into by accident when I lost the company $20,000 in one day. And this was about 8 years ago at Imgur, if you have never said it out loud. It's actually Imgur. And this is before we had integrated Sentry. So I messed up some JavaScript code. Nobody was dogfooding the particular page that I broke it on. Turns out this is one of our kind of higher traffic pages, and the JavaScript blocked the ads sidebar unit from loading. No user is going to report that the ads unit isn't loading. But the ads engineering department is like, where'd that $20,000 go from yesterday? Does anybody know? And somebody dug in, and the blameless postmortem. They're like, yeah, so this commit, we're not going to say who because it's a blameless postmortem. Well, this commit broke it so that we're not loading the ads unit. And also we ran the numbers, and yeah, that's $20,000 error. And I'm like, I didn't know the value of my time. I definitely didn't know the value of my errors. So that was a fun revert.
I feel like I need a sticker that says, I know the value of my errors or something. Jordan?
So let's see, probably my first major one of these moments was back in 2009. My startup at the time was running a URL shortener, and I was loaded up the MySQL console in production, as I did at the time, because why not? And I was trying to delete a certain couple rows out of it, and I typed my statement, and I hit enter, and I noticed it hanging there for a second.
Oh, no.
I had, of course, forgotten my where clause.
Oh, no.
And I hit Control-C as fast as I could. I had ended up deleting about 40% of all of the link redirections out of the database, and I had no backups. So I had to manually look at the access logs for the previous 6 months and try to reconstruct all the URLs I had destroyed. I'm pretty sure some of them are permanently gone, and this domain is long since retired, but It was a very panicky moment for me. After that, I set up automated backups, and so that even if I did do this again, I would be able to restore it with a lot less work.
Yeah. I feel like we need to now do like a poll in Discord, who wins the biggest oh shit moment. So, you know, we've all encountered them, very stressful. Maybe lots of time to fix them, maybe not as much time. But in prep for this conference, Sachin and I were chatting, and you had some interesting, very useful ways of trying to remain calm. I'm wondering if maybe you can share that, and then if anyone else on the panel has ways that they try to remain calm or just don't.
Yeah, so it all starts out with me getting tricked into going technical diving to Mexico. So two of my mentors, Zach and Leo, basically, called me over to Mexico, and they're like, hey, come diving with us. Turns out it's like technical cave diving, and probably some of the hardest thing that I've done mentally, physically. It was very stressful and stress-inducing, and water is an inherently unstable environment. And the moment you try to, do one other thing. So actually, my first exercise was my instructor just came and gave me a weight and left me there, and I was freaking out because the weight changes your buoyancy, you can't breathe right, and then he would come and like take away the weight, and then I'm like shooting up to the surface. So it's inherently unstable, and it's your job to kind of try and control that. So got out of Mexico, came back, and I realized that they teach you a few principles, and incidents and when things break feel very similar to that situation when you feel like you're going to die, and you're like, oh my God, I hit everything, I'm going to die, and especially if you're the person that broke the thing. In reality, I'm still alive. I haven't died from an incident yet, so fingers crossed that keeps happening. But the tools that they taught me for diving and technical diving were really useful to reapply during the incident process. And so the three things that I generally use is, first is just breathing. And you just take a second and you breathe. And the moment you realize that you can breathe and you're alive, everything else feels less important and everything else feels kind of okay. And it seems simple, but it's something we often forget to do in an incident where you rush into it and you're like, everything's broken, oh my God, how do I fix this? And then you're like breathing really heavily, and that the feeling where your cheeks get hot and your ears are hot, and everyone's felt that, and that's kind of what happens. And breathing helps. One of the other things I do is I make tea, and Shannon, my partner, helps me, step away, make tea, and we just have a really quick conversation and breathe, and just calm down before, especially if it's a long haul incident. The second sort of tool that they teach you is a checklist. And so you run through your simple checklists of breathing, buoyancy, and so on and so forth. And if you can get through that checklist, you're like, okay, I can progressively make harder and harder choices because I know my base level things have been covered. Mm-hmm. And so translating that out into incidents, usually it's, can we reproduce the issue? Is it an active issue? What went out where we were good and now we're not good? And so breaking it down into those small questions and having that checklist and just immediately running through that saves you a lot of time and mental energy and not having to like freak out. And then the last thing is just sort of personally, it's helped me and helped most of my engineering org is you assume good intentions all the time. And you truly believe that people did the best that they could with the tools that they had at the time. Mm-hmm. And the incident is about the thing that broke, not the person that broke it. Mm-hmm. And so if you just keep drilling that into your brain, when you get into this incident, everyone is just hyper-focused on, okay, what's the thing that needs to get fixed versus who broke the thing? Like, what, like which team do we need to go to? And it's like, no, it doesn't matter. Let's just fix the thing that's broken. So I hope that's useful, but the three things, just basically breathe, have some sort of ritual, have a checklist, and then share your checklist with other people if it helps your team and stuff too. and assume good intentions. Yeah.
I appreciate that, run book, checklists, these things have come up a lot. This is something that's true with pilots too, right? Like they have a very specific checklist and another person to talk through it with them because they're in high stakes situations. Yeah, Jordan?
Yeah, I really like what you just said. The breathing thing in particular, it's remarkable how much I've personally forgotten to breathe in situations, even though that's like the thing I need to do to live. The experiences that reminded me of while you were speaking are the times I've been in potentially bad car accidents. And also, I used to do social work at a group home here in San Francisco. And when you have a teenager yelling at you and throwing things, like, and to a different degree, my own children, it's I've found that it's helpful to kind of go into like a triage mode of like, take a breath and then focus on what is actually the most important right now. It's not like punishing a child or like, which car insurance company do I have? It's, how do I get the car into a safe place? How do I make sure that the child isn't going to hurt themselves or another person? Like, ignore the fact that they're just destroying property. Is like, there any, physical danger? Like, I have to kind of aggressively triage those things and keep my own ego and perspective out of it. And that's not an easy thing to do, and I fail at that a lot. But when I'm in a tech incident, it helps me put it in perspective to think about all of those times when it was like really a problem, and how this is just like a line item on somebody's balance sheet, or a conversation I'll have to have with my manager. But it's like, in the scheme of things, it's not that big a deal. And I think all of those scenarios kind of overlap in how that in that it's useful in all of them to take a moment, center myself, and breathe, and then like figure out what I actually need to focus on first.
It's interesting that the same theme from the WTF panel where we were talking about making choices before, right? Like what frameworks, what tools to make, the same types of things have been coming up, right? It's get your ego out of the way and don't focus on the who, focus on the why or the what, right? And so it's as if we planned these things. No, but truly, the panels shouldn't be so planned, right? And so it really is just showing you that that leaders in engineering are thinking about the same thing, whether we're thinking about it from the perspective of let's get started to, oh my God, something horrible is happening. Joel or Andrew, do you have any ways of staying calm?
So I'll offer, like, I think we can talk to, like, what as the engineer. So the last 10 plus years, I managed large orgs. And so, like, there's, like, a very different art when you're on the receiving end of it, right? Like, and so I think that that's also, I really appreciate, like, how they're framing it, because for me, the biggest part was, like, not getting involved. And so I think that's actually, if there's managers in the room, right, like, I actually think it's very important to, you can't do anything at that point in time. I think of it as, like, if I'm a coach and I'm playing a sport and I fielded the team, if I get involved, I can't run onto the field and try to play the game for them. And so for me, like, I try to think of it as, like, what's the environment I'm creating before that, so that when they're out there playing this game, they know the rules, they have the checklist, they're practicing the checklist, and everything I have to do is before that. So I take solace in that, like, if I've done my job well, everything else that they possibly could happen, like, they're going to play the game and the game's going to come out the way the game's going to come out. There's nothing I can do in that moment to change the outcome of that game. All I can do is, like, look forward ahead at that. And so I just tend to think about it as, how can I be supportive to the team at that point? And how do I get out of their way? And how do I make sure the rest of the leadership team stays out of their way as well?
I appreciate that everyone has brought in topics from non-engineering related things, life experiences, right? And I think it's important to remember that, like, our jobs are not unique life experiences. Joel?
Yeah, so I will talk about this for hours. Happy hours at 4 p.m. All of this is amazing. And one of the particular checklists that I really love is the HALT framework. So that's, you're panicking, shit's going wrong, check yourself. Are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely, or are you tired? So these are like 4 quick things. You can just be like, do I need to take a nap? Do I need a Snickers bar? Do I need somebody to help me out? Do I need a hug? Do I need to go like practice a ritual with my partner? Or am I just really pissed off at this bug? And I just need to take a minute to just sit down and breathe. So this is really good for in the moment, but you can use this framework for various scopes, various levels, where like if you're the manager or you're the director or you're the exec, what's your responsibility? Your responsibility is not to go and play on the field. Your responsibility is to prepare, so line manager, you prepare your team to be ready to respond to stuff. You run fire drills, you get people like running deploys all the time, whatever. If you're the director, it's you're prepping longer term. You're like 3 months out. Okay, let's build fallback plans where it's like, all right, we're gonna get 2 weeks into this plan. We're gonna have like our second thing where it's like, oh, we have some long range incident. What's our fallback? And exec level, it's like, okay, we're thinking like a year ahead. If we're gonna run out of money, what's the fallback plan then? How do we make sure that we don't go hungry? So a lot of this is like the farther out you get from being the initial incident commander, it's being the planning ahead. And you can do that for yourself too, where it's like, make sure you got a Snickers in your pocket. Make sure that like you go home at 5 p.m. if you're working a 9 to 5. If you're working night shift, you know, go wake up in the morning, like, or wake up in, you know, your morning. So it's like, yeah, balance out everything and just prep to be able to take care of yourself. And this is like, because incident response is like, as a person with ADHD, I will panic and I will try to solve everything. And it's like, no, I got to figure out what can I do, what should I do, and should I take a nap really quick?
We have some questions on the Discord.
Well, I just
Go
want to
ahead,
add
yeah.
the what can I do, what should I do. There's a mindfulness perspective that I've heard in different contexts is about evaluating what you're about to do is this useful? Like, and also evaluating your feelings, like, or your reactions to what someone says. And I think that's proven really helpful for me to apply in these kinds of situations.
I think that the folks on Discord are a little suspicious. They're wondering how we're all so perfect at just like knowing how to stay calm and zen and knowing what to do. But truly, like one of the questions from Princess Marcia is why calm down? Why not use that adrenaline rush to get you through fixing that incident?
I think there is a time and place for it. Like I definitely think that you should not like if you can channel it and you can find a way to use it, you should. I think that I'm trying to think of a thoughtful way to frame this. You're in wartime at that stage, right? Like you should accept, like, and Ben Harwood says like the wartime peacetime article, if anyone has ever read that, right? Like it is wartime, right? Like you do need to change the rules of engagement. Like if you think that it's the same rules of like, let's go get an OKR list, let's go do this planning, it's not. Like I've dealt with like very large codes reds that last for like multiple weeks to months on a storage system James may, or if he's still around, may or may not have built, where like massive corruption and we're not going to have hard drives and we're moving them around on pallets between data centers. And yeah, like there's not, the niceties do go out the window in some sense. And there is an element of like, no, we're going to do this now and I'm in charge and you're going to do this thing. And like, that's the end of the story. And like, you have to assume positive intent, but you know, we have to be candid and we have to actually move it forward. So I do think that it's like, this is like Zen, but it's, you have to move the ball forward.
I give myself I make the decision.
Yeah, you make the decision.
I'm going to make the decision for this time period to be, Jewel?
So it's about making decisions. If you are like berserking, if you are like, I'm going to get this, like there's a car coming towards me, I'm going to run out of the way, great, get out of the way. But if we're working with really complex systems in software engineering, or we're working with like huge knowledge management problems, we're working with big teams, you can't just be running around bashing everything. You have to be making smart decisions. And if you're panicking, you're going to make very bad decisions and you're going to drown and you're going to take your team down with you. If you're scuba diving, you will die and your tender will die with you. And in software, the stakes are a little bit lower unless you're working in mission critical software like NASA. I used to work at Epic Medical Records. Our onboarding was, here's stories about ways that we've literally killed people. Don't do that. And if you're dealing with an incident, stay calm. And that's how we're going to get everybody out together.
Well, the other answer I would have to that is that's not what adrenaline's for. Adrenaline is something we evolved to do to run away from bears. I mean, our bodies aren't built to sit down all day long. They're not built to use computers. They're not built to think about complex problems. They're built to like stay alive and reproduce. And the fact that we have this evolutionary response, if you can channel it, awesome. Like repurpose it, great. But that doesn't mean that it's automatically or inherently useful, right? We're just poorly adapted to modern life, and learning how to stay calm and how to manage your kind of reptilian brain, or however you want to describe it, that's part of our like skill set that we all need to develop to function in society.
So I would add one thing to that. I've heard checklists mentioned a couple times, and like if you're running the checklist and you're not making it a stress situation, you're not running the checklist. Like that's the other part to it, right? It's like you have to put the stress in the situation. So find a way to make the stakes higher and keep turning it up until until they can adapt to it. Like that's something that I learned that like the tabletop exercise doesn't work well enough. It's like good to like as a thought exercise, but make it real. Have it so they don't know that this is actually a drill at some point, right? When I was at Google, they had like Dirt Week, right? And it's like they did that. Like you run the process, you see it, you actually feel it, and I think you want to feel that stress situation, and you have to train the team on it. Like I think that if you think it's just the checklist and someone's going to pull it out and they're going to do it, like I'll go back to the sports analogy. An NFL team does not do that, right? In the last 2 minutes of the game, right? They run that drill in practice every week, so they're ready to play that last 2 minutes. And so I think just having checklists isn't enough.
Yeah. I think you're both kind of saying the same thing too, right? Where it's like, have the checklist, it's real. You know, you need to have that high stakes situation so that when it is high stakes, you're not just relying on adrenaline. You're relying on the practice with the adrenaline. Sachin?
So one of the things I think is also courtesy to other people, because usually when you're in an incident, you're not the only one in an incident, and you could totally hulk out and use all your adrenaline to try and like fix the thing and do all the things and make all the PRs, but you're probably adding more noise and confusion to that situation where people are already freaking out, they're already stressed out. And so when you come into the situation being like, let's go, like let's fix this thing, people are kind of freaked out by that. Whereas if you come in and you're like calm and you're like, well, what's the problem? Where are we at? Like, what's the change? And so you break that problem down. The goal is to kind of channel that adrenaline to kind of get many chunks of it. When you do need to make that PR, when you like do need to run that thing in prod, and you don't miss a where clause by mistake. You're like, oh my God, I didn't hit enter because of all my adrenaline. I caught myself and I added a not to you, but it's just as an example. I think it's a courtesy to other people to kind of, show up calm. And it's honestly harder. Like I've done both where I've showed up all hulked out and my manager's DM'd me and he's like, stop floundering. Like, what's up? Like, why are you doing so many things? And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, let me breathe. Let me go back to that. And usually solving, like you're saying, these bigger complex systems, like having all these problems, happens better when you're calm and the team is calm and everyone is just chilled out a bit.
And to some points that y'all have made, like probably the more that responsibility you hold, the calmer you should probably be, at least to the people that you're working with. Do we have any questions from the audience in person? If not, we do have another. Okay, yeah.
Andrew said something about the shift between peacetime and wartime and how during an incident, you have to be more prescriptive sometimes. Sometimes you got to tell people to do things and things feel more hierarchical. Can you talk more about how to do this, how to think about that in advance, and how to get away with a very different shift in how an organization operates when they're under duress?
Yeah, I think that some people are more inclined for wartime versus peacetime. I think it's just like there's a natural resting state. Those that can move back and forth into it, like it's a practice skill. I think that you have to be, this is like a cop-out answer, but like you have to be your authentic self all the time in that sense, so that when you do switch that mode, right, and you are hierarchical and you are saying, hey, James, I need you to do this thing, it's not, like they understand it's coming from a place of love, and it's not coming from a place of like, oh, I don't trust you, right? And for me, it's like every day you have to be on in order to build that trust. And like in some sense, you're using that at that point in time. And so I always thought of it that way. I think that there is the change in tone. There is like all the body language cues. There's all of those things that you have to like practice and like know what you're doing. I think you said like you went to intentionally turn it on and do that. I have not seen an incident run well where it's by consensus. It doesn't work. And especially if they're running over long periods of time, they definitely don't work in that case. Plan it in advance. Have your incident commanders lined up front. That's like, I mean, I spent, I don't know, a year building an incident management process for Dropbox, and then they kept adding commanders over time, and it definitely turned into by committee, which then we ended up pulling it all back and saying like, no, like there's an exec in charge, or there's like a director in charge of this when this occurs. I mean, it's a balance. Like you have to constantly test it, like is the best way to say it. Like it's like anything else, just keep running it over and over and over again.
Well, the comparison that pops up in my head here is, so let's talk about like styles, like style preferences in code, right? There's all sorts of arguments that can be had about that. The place that you never want to have them is in a pull request to do something else, right? If somebody is putting up a bug fix or a feature or whatever, like it's great to have those style debates. Some people hate them, some people love them. The people who love them can go have those debates, but not in the PR. You decide separately what the style is, and then you follow that style in the PR, even if it's terrible and you hate it. And similarly, if you think you know better how an incident should be managed, awesome. I guarantee you there are people that you can talk to and you can get your ideas listened to. But during the incident is not the time to improvise. You follow the checklist, and like maybe you add an extra step if you're checking something, great. But like it's less about constraining you and more about making sure that when you wake up at 3 a.m. and you have no idea what you're doing, that it's harder for you to mess up. Right? Like surgeons keep a checklist of every item they bring into the OR, even if a surgeon has never in 30 years left an item inside a body, just to make sure that never happens, right? Like it's, you know, we have to account for the fact that everyone screws up, everyone, and that if the process isn't designed to manage that, then it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Can I go back to wartime and checklists? There's a Navy aphorism that is, it's slow is, what is it? Do you know this? Slow is like slow and smooth. Do you know this one?
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Yeah, slow is smooth. So it's slow down. By slowing down, you'll make good decisions. You'll follow the checklist. You'll check in with everybody and make sure things get done right. You won't have those discussions at the wrong time. And then by being able to do it slow, you'll move smoothly. And you zoom out and you're like, oh, I could have fixed this in half an hour, but that half an hour would have been like 2 hours of fixing it poorly afterwards. It's like, let me just take that whole 2 hours just to do it right, do it smoothly, and then in the end, it's fast, because I just did it all by the book and everything went nice. And then once we're out of the incident mode, then we can go back and do nitpicks at each other.
I do think there's also a under subtext to what we're talking about that's like a cheat code, which is like, it's actually not the checklist, it's like the leadership ability that's happening through this. The checklist is a compensating control that's there. So I look at it as the best incident commanders are probably some of your best leaders as well. And so if you develop the leadership skill outside of the incident, like I almost focus on that as well. It's like two-prong approach. Like, let's get great checklists, but then I need a leader to actually like implement this checklist and run this thing. So that's the other part that I think gets dropped on the floor a lot when people think about building incident processes, is you have to train the leaders. If you don't, like, and it's not train them how to use the checklist. It's like train them to be leaders, and then like delegate the authority to them and get out of their way. Like, James will attest to this. I don't think I ever got in the weeds in incidents when I was managing almost 300 people, and I was like not in the weeds in an incident, like except if it's like catastrophic company ending. And I think you have to train the leaders to do it.
The other quote I like relevant to what Jewel was talking about is if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 4 sharpening my axe.
I like that.
One of the other things also I think that we're touching on is like trusting the team. And so if you've done all that prep outside of when it is wartime and you've polished plans, done all the things, when it is an incident, everything should hopefully go smoothly, and you step out and the team steps in and they take over whatever needs to happen, and giving them sort of those tools to kind of make sure that they don't forget stuff, or like the checklist is very obvious and like it's in front of them and they can run all these things is a very powerful tool to have.
I actually look at it as like the greatest sign of, it's like you're not respecting them if you don't. Like that, like by definition in my mind, like if I see a leader that doesn't do that, like you're not respecting your team, you're not respecting yourself in that sense either. Like that's your job, and you need to get the team there, and then you have to step out of the way and you have to trust them.
That's what I appreciate about managers and directors who are like, you get the wheel, we're going to give you enough rope or like enough rein where you can mess up, because if you don't mess up, you're not going to grow, because you can read a book and like learn from the book, whatever, but like you're going to concrete those lessons from when you are feeling actually in danger. That's when you're going to internalize that, and when you're in the incident, that's when you're like, crap, I forgot to do the where clause, and then you also got to go back and like write the book. Like you do your retrospectives afterwards when you're calm and you can like talk through stuff and nitpick things a little bit. But it's, yeah, you just gotta let the baby touch the stove a little bit so that they can feel what that pain feels like and learn from it and do better next time and teach other people how to break things in interesting and new ways.
Yeah, right. So we had a question in Discord from Mr. Swats, and it's actually a question that I was hoping to ask you all anyways, which is, okay, so we've got these complex ecosystems. When incidents will happen, and we've kind of talked about what to do when they do, but is there a way to get ahead of the shit? Like get ahead of the incidents? Is there a way to prevent major accidents from happening?
The opposite of move fast and break things. Take your time, don't cut corners. If there's some strange business reason why you have to, make sure you fix the business process so that doesn't happen again, and make sure you make the time to actually clean up your technical debt.
Yeah.
It's shocking but unsurprising probably to everyone here that that's not a thing most companies are good at doing.
Yeah.
So one specific way to break a technical debt is so feature flagging systems, where it's generally the theme is you want to be able to react quickly to problems. You want to be prepared. So that's not just preparing the team how to use your tools, how do you like set up your lint fixers, but it's having a toolkit built up that you can respond quickly. So investing in quick deploys, investing in being able to pull your backups quickly and restore your backups quickly. And then you have to constantly be doing like fire drills to be like, let's take this down. So like Netflix talks so much about taking stuff down and bringing it back up and like exercising their tools. One of the things that we've adopted a lot of Reddit is with feature flagging systems, where it's like, this is just bread and butter. Every pull request, you have to say, here's the feature flag that covers this, or here's why I don't need a feature flag. Because deploys, even as fast as you can run a deploy, it's still going to take a couple minutes to roll out. Feature flag, we set it up where you can go into the config, you flip it, that gets distributed to all your clients and your servers within like a couple of seconds sometimes. Like the clients may take a minute or a day or whatever, but it's like just having these tools prepared and having people constantly use how do we quickly react to stuff. Then we can pull back, be like, oh, we see something going wrong. We can isolate it to this commit. What's the commit? It's behind some feature flag. Turn the feature flag off. Cool. Now you don't need to do another release for a week because you've just turned off the feature flag. Like this breaking things isn't running anymore. Fine, great, love it.
To also touch on something Jules said, breaking your system in new and novel ways is very important. So if you have an incident and you have the same incident again and again and again, you need to fix that incident. Like that's not the way your incidents should kind of work. So if you ever have an incident that happens more than once, something's fundamentally flawed with that system. And you really need to focus in and concentrate on why this thing is breaking in the same way multiple times. So in terms of getting ahead of the shit, it's a little hard when it's kind of like the unknown unknowns, right? Like those things will always break. You can't control humans. It's all hard, and someone might type something, and that's kind of hard to control for. But the thing you can do is the moment that case shows up in your code base, in your systems, build something or put some process in place, or do even a simple SOP where it's like, well, find a pairing buddy if you're running this command on prod, and make sure they're checking your work. Easy fix, and just make sure that incident doesn't happen again. So try not to repeat your incidents. Like if they're happening fairly often, then something's wrong.
I would also argue half cheeky that it's better to have a bug than to fix it without a regression test.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, to go back half an hour, simplicity of if this thing keeps breaking and we're struggling to fix it, maybe pay somebody else to fix it. Maybe replace this whole system with a vendor who's like specializing it. Like sometimes you just want to spend the time, and sometimes you just want to spend the money instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about that earlier today. You don't need to rebuild auth every time. Yeah, and speaking of creative ways to try to break your systems, when I had my startup, microwaves can just totally take out your internet, just so you know. We weren't allowed to have lunch for a week. Anybody else have questions in the audience? Yes.
So Joel just mentioned sometimes like buying something from a vendor. So I'm curious, what happens when shit happens and it's caused by a vendor? Like, do you have any stories of really good scenarios where the vendor really stepped up and helped? And like, what does that look like for a vendor to really show up and support you?
Good question.
I mean, I don't know specific examples off the top of my head, but team communication, so like reaching out to help somebody. So Slack's been getting better and better at this, where like, I was talking with some of the Sentry demo people earlier, and Reddit and Sentry go back years and years and years. And so Slack over the years has introduced like group channels, shared channels, where it's like, cool, you can have people from 2 different workspaces. Like the channel will show up in both spaces. It's like, cool, there's an incident happening. You can introduce people. They can be talking. They can be collaborating. Sentry and Reddit just set up a shared workspace years ago because we're just like, well, we need the help. So yeah, just the reaching, like bringing in the whole team is just a valuable way where it's like, and if the vendors are like responsive, where it's like, oh, they've said, and also SLAs. So if we're talking about like planning ahead to set up good systems, this is what the SLA framework is for. Like we're talking to SREs. So this is service level agreement. Thank you. Service level agreements, where you in times of peace and times of calm, you define this is when things break. This is how quickly we're going to respond, like depending on the level of severity, depending on the impact, and this is how quickly we're going to try and fix it. And you know. We're also defining like how do we measure those service level objectives and like KPIs. Like all of this stuff is just figuring out what's the impact, how quickly do we need to respond to it, and then responding to it. So like vendors who define those SLAs, that's a really good sign where it's like, oh, they're putting that thought into being supportive of you, and you can just look at the agreement and say, yeah, this works for us. And then when they step up and actually like fulfill their SLAs, and they can, you know, then they can report on metrics of like, yeah, here's our amount of downtime. Like we can promise 5 nines, and here's the graphs to demonstrate that.
Let me ask kind of like flip the question back around and ask, why is managing a vendor and having a vendor relationship different than a team on the far side of the company?
That's what I was gonna say.
Why is the vendor relationship or managing the vendor relationship different than how you have to deal? If I own a system, if I own a subsystem, right? I own that system, and I have to take full ownership of that, whether I have a vendor, I'm using AWS, who's a vendor technically, or if I have a physical data center with my own server in it, that outage is still my outage. And so I have to deal with that no matter what. So I don't think of it as like I'm to manage a vendor. I need a process to manage it, like what we're talking about here, but from like a mindset perspective of building the system, I have to own that. Like you can make the choice to say Amazon went down, so therefore it's okay. Like the internet is down, so therefore my system is down. Like, okay, right? I'm noise in the system. But at the end of the day, your customers don't care that Amazon went down, right? So your customers also don't care if the auth team or the database team went down internally either. Like they just care that your thing doesn't work. And so I think of it as like, okay, well, you have to have a contingency plan for that, as opposed to I'm going to worry about managing vendors. You can build vendor processes, have vendor managers, and all the rest of that. But at the end of the day, you still own the outage.
One of the things that helps here also is building your systems to be super defensive and kind of not trusting anyone outside your system. And one of the things with vendors is having multiple of them. So if you use sort of AWS and you have them for storage, also use GCP. And that might be a little expensive, but the fact that not having one is catastrophic to you would kind of mean, well, we're willing to invest in that redundancy. And same goes for like teams. If a billing service is failing, or if your database team is failing their DBs, having a conversation with them and saying like, hey, can we make some of this more resilient is also.
I was going to say, one thing that I think is actually super important is at the very top level, like company values or like whatever the value system you have is, dictates also how you respond in these outages, right? And so if I run a company that is customer focused and customer oriented, right? Like by definition, in the billing system goes down, I should probably just give it away for free at that point in time. Like it's the right thing to do for the customer. Conversely, if I had a company that said like, no, like our goal is revenue and I don't actually care about the customer, right? Like, okay, then I should shut the system down because that's actually the right thing to do based on the value system. And like, you shouldn't penalize the engineering team for operating within that framework. So that's kind of like how I think about it also. It's like, make the decision based on what the company's value system is or like what the mission is and try to stay aligned to that even in the moment there.
And I would also like to your question earlier, or your point earlier, a vendor is in the same bucket to me as another service, or your database, or a third-party package, or a different team's function or module. Like, if you're not expecting that everything that everything you use, like, will break at some point, and then handling that appropriately, it's gonna break, and you're gonna be screwed. So, like, you should be building that into your contracts with your vendors, of course. You should be having the equivalent of internal contracts with the other teams that you depend on in your company. But like, ultimately, as Andrew said, you own your outage, and so you need to be defensive, like Sachin said, at every possible point, and come up with the like least broken experience that you can actually provide, assuming that things break.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions in the audience? Right. I have a couple of rapid fire, no explanation. So I'm going to preface this one with, I'm not saying that no one should know how to do the examples that they're going to give. And I'm saying that because they shouldn't have to explain themselves because it's rapid fire. What are things that you now know or knew at some point how to do, but only because our developer workflow was broken or was not working properly? I mean, for example, Sachin already said one.
For me, definitely.
Reading
minified JavaScript is way up on that list of things I don't want to ever do again. Yeah, it's okay, no explanation. Any other things that you know how to do or at some point knew how to do that like no one should ever know how to do that?
I mean, I have hundreds of NPM packages that encapsulate things that no one should ever have to know how to do. That's why I made it as a package, so nobody has to suffer with that knowledge again.
Yeah.
How do you reliably detect what kind of a thing something is in JavaScript? It's not actually easy. How do you like protect against prototype pollution or people mucking with the environment? I don't want people to have to know how to do that. Yeah. I just want it to be fixed for them.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why we have jQuery, right? So we never have to remember any of that.
Absolutely.
Sorry. This is going back out to people who work on systems from 10 years ago. You don't have to use jQuery anymore.
Yeah.
Man, my example is going to be way, I was going to say 15 versions of PHP under Apache SUEXEC.
That's a good one. Any others?
I mean, there's probably still a tab open upstairs where I was showing minified JavaScript payloads that are like, oh, there's a bunch of enums in here, and I've memorized many of these. Okay, my data engineers, they have memorized the BigQuery project IDs for like 5 different IDs. These should all be bookmarked. They've memorized it all. It's like 165.111. That's our project ID.
Yeah.
Why do I know this? Because it's burned in my head from 5 years of working on the same project.
Yeah. Regex, however you want to pronounce it.
I mean, every time I use regex, I have to learn regex again, so.
Exactly. How about a random fact that no one should know?
My understanding is that in the original version of PHP, functions were keyed off of the length of their name. So there was only one 6-character function and only one 7-character function and only one 8-character function. And that may be a big cause of some of the confusion in standard PHP function names.
Yeah, and just on the topic of PHP, function names are case insensitive. And so you can write really funky, weird, camel case, up and down function names, and it will work. And
Any other fun facts?
I say, should we just make this into a JavaScript WTF session? I mean, these are recorded on YouTube already. You're like, Python, what, like, is not a number actually a number?
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember any of these at this point, but at one point I understood most of the Linux cap table, so we could figure out how not to let certain users write to certain partitions with certain commands. It was like complete chaos, but yes, went down the rabbit hole there.
Yeah. Any last minute questions before I let them have final thoughts? I'm telling you, I'm good at the awkward silence.
I
Okay.
mean, you got to leave people like, that's actually a fun skill of like, as a manager, as like a leader, that's the leadership skills, leaving awkward silences,
so
make it
important.
really awkward,
Yeah.
and somebody else will speak up.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, I mean, we know that if, especially in kind of a presentation style, and especially if you're going to be handed a microphone, if someone says, "Do you have a question?" you got to go, "Oh shit! They just asked a question. They asked me to think of okay. Now what did they just say?" And then they go back to, "Okay, oh wait, I do have a question. Oh wait, do I have the confidence to say it in front of a microphone in front of people?" Okay, and so that takes time.
So what kind of shitpost we got in Discord?
I'm pretty sure I mean, there's some stuff going on. I wasn't following live. I have someone in the audience kind of sharing. We do have an update though, keyboard features. Mechanical split backlit my laptop. How about answering that? Which is your favorite? Mechanical, split keyboard, backlit keyboard, or you just use your laptop? Those are your only choices. You don't get to have another.
I'm gonna say mechanical. So satisfying.
It is.
It's just laptop. I don't want to get used to something I can't always have.
Split keyboard, because I got tendon issues, so I'm still working because of that.
Laptop, because I'm incredibly lazy at like doing it. Like, if it's easy, I just do it.
Nice, nice. The winner, though, online on Discord was mechanical. So sorry, you're wrong, and you now have to buy mechanical keyboards. And if you are following along on Discord, and then the last one for today is your favorite music to code to. All right, we've got lo-fi, classical, ambient, podcast, or silence. Do you want to answer those?
Second option?
Classical.
I have a Spotify playlist where it's superhero songs from the 90s or something like that. It's
Nice.
electronic coding music
Nice.
without words. Pretty solid.
Like it.
I'd love to try that out, but between all those choices, I would probably actually go with silence, because whatever I put on in the background when I'm coding, my brain loses the ability to hear it. And so like reruns of old TV shows I've seen 17
Yes.
times is usually what's going on.
Yes.
Seinfeld, Friends, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've got classical superhero music, because all those video, like Zelda, all of the like JRPG symphonic backgrounds, because those are music that's like, you don't have to pay attention to it, but it keeps you moving. And then you're like, now I will do a retro. Let's like go to the I'm wandering through the village music. And then I'm like, okay, it's incident time. Let's put on fight boss music.
We need to make an incident playlist.
Silence, but the last time I wrote some code was probably way too long ago.
So we need to fix that too.
You should take
Any
down production.
parting words from each of you on how to handle either pre-incident, post-incident, during incident?
Well, so I think from all the things I said today, if you could take away anything, just know it's going to be okay. Like, we talked about all the things breaking and, you know, that it's hard and all this other stuff. And it's stressful. So when you're in it, just know that it's going to end and you'll be fine, and the company's going to move on, you're going to move on, and it's going to be okay. So
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have low or no confidence, relax. Everyone screws up, no matter how experienced they are, it'll be fine. If you have confidence, be scared, plan, don't cut corners, prepare.
Just keep breathing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say just prepare. Like, I think lack of preparation has always been the thing I've observed teams that have bad incidents have not done.
Well, thank you so much, all of you. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone, for asking questions.